Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IEEE Young Professionals webinar series. Today, we have part two of a series of webinars that we have on personal finance. And today, our speaker is Stacey He, which gave half of the presentation for part one. So today, she'll be giving us part two. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Carius. I'm one of the webinar specialists with the MGA Young Professionals team. I am also the vice chair for communications and marketing for the IEEE Young Professionals Global Board. In case you didn't know, we'll be probably continuing our monthly webinar series, 1 to 2 webinars a month into 2015 on a wide range of topics: effective communication, leadership, and technical, non-technical topics like what we have here today. In terms of our audience participation, please, during the webinar, type any questions you have in the question box below from our IEEE TV interface. I'll try to get through as many questions as I can at the end of the webinar, and you can actually upvote for whichever question you want to hear answered first. In case you didn't know, we had a new name, new look, new feel. Graduates of the last decade, IEEE Affinity Group is now the IEEE Young Professionals. The IEEE Young, the IEEE Gold was not instantly recognizable as a Young Professionals group, which is exactly what we are. We've had a tremendous success in terms of really relaunching the Gold brand into Young Professionals. Please check out our blog, our Gold Rush blog, which is actually going to get rebranded in the coming months to actually more reflect our new Young Professionals brand. So stay tuned for that. And then please connect with us online. We have new career-based services, which I'm going to be talking about, the Mentor Center and the Resume Lab. But please follow us online. We are very active on Facebook and actually on YouTube, LinkedIn, all sorts of social media. We're constantly posting videos to YouTube, including all of our webinars, which you guys can view at your leisure. But you know, we do post tech updates, tech events, cool events happening all over the world on both YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn and Twitter. So please check us out online. So moving into our webinar today. Today we have a personal finance webinar series part 2. We have financial planner Stacey He with us today, based here in Toronto, just like myself. This is a second part on a series of webinars on personal finance, and I'm really looking forward to it. And Stacey, please go ahead and take it away.
Hi, thanks, Matt. Hi everyone. It's good to be back again. Today I'm going to be talking about ideas and strategies on how to build your wealth. If you joined us for the previous seminar, we talked about the 10 healthy habits of financial management. And so I thought I'd switch gears a bit today in terms of getting in more detail about wealth building ideas. And so our agenda for today, we're going to take a look at some financial mistakes that people make, and whether you're in Canada or joining us from different parts of the world, I think this is still stand true. We're going to take a look at some of the strategies on building wealth. So 5 in particular. 1 being paying yourself first, protecting your savings from tax and inflation. You know, those are what I call the enemies of wealth. We're going to delve into the world of investment. Where exactly should you invest and how? And a common question that I always get is, you know, if I have some debts, whether it's mortgage or lines of credit, do I pay down my debt or do I save, right? Or student loans or anything like that. And then finally, we're going to look at long-term planning, since that's for retirement. And also looking at ways to protect your assets, right? Because it's one thing to build your assets and your investments, but how do you protect it? So how good are we with our money, right? And this is, you know, pertaining to Canada, but I thought this was quite interesting. I thought I'd share this with you. Bank of Montreal wanted to find out. So they went out and asked the question, how many of you are relying on winning the lottery to fund retirement? And this is quite scary because look at the statistics. In British Columbia, 41% are relying on winning the lottery to retire. Here in Ontario, 33%. Not looking so bright, right? And you know, I think a lot of that has to do with people are not saving enough. We're taking on a lot of debt, and so these are scary numbers. And so let's take a look at what we can do to not be a part of that statistic, right? The number one thing I think it's good for people to do is having a financial roadmap. And what I mean by that is breaking down your financial goals into 4 different categories. And you could do this at home on a piece of paper. Divide your goals into short-term, mid-term, long-term, and also a 4th box for asset protection, right? Because we all have different goals, and what you need to do is determine what should you be doing financially to help you reach each of these goals. So, for example, under the short term, you may want to own a home, may want to go on vacation more often. In the midterm, education planning for the kids, your investment portfolio, and long-term planning, of course, is paying off the mortgage, retirement, and all those things. And so looking at each of the boxes, you should ask yourself at any given point in time, what are you doing in your finances to help you reach each of those goals? So what are some of the mistakes that people make when it comes to money? And I see these very often. One is, and we talked about this in the first webinar, and I keep on coming back to it because it's so important, the concept of having a budget, right? It's not enough just to have a budget, you've got to follow it. And if you don't follow that budget, what happens is you forget to save. You spend what's left. Usually you save what's left. Usually it's nothing, right? So what you need to do is save first and then spend what's left. So let's say you do have a budget or you want to make a budget. What's the rule that you should follow? And this is what I call the rule of thumb, the 50-30-20 rule. May have touched base on it in the first webinar, but just thought I summarize a little bit because it's so important. So this 50-30-20 rule, what it says is 50% of your pay should go to essentials. So that's food, rent, mortgage, things like that. 30% can go to lifestyle expenses. That's entertainment, going out with friends, and then 20% of it should go to your financial priorities. So that's actually savings, whether that's saving or investing. Right. And so out of the 20%, 10 or 20% of the paycheck that you're putting away, here in Canada, we have investment vehicles called the RSP and TFSA. But if you're in a different country, of course, they are, you have a different investment vehicle. But look into what those vehicles are and put really 20% of your paycheck towards them. This slide I'm going to perhaps skip because it's really only applicable to Canada. But just kind of to summarize, the RSP and the TFSA are the 2 investment vehicles that we have here, and they are used for different purposes, right? TFSA is more for short-term savings. RSP is more for long-term savings to buy your first home. Investigate so let's say if you're joining us from the States today, investigate what type of vehicles you have over there that can help you reach your different investment goals. So a common question that I get is, do I pay down my debt or should I invest my money? And I think this is sort of the $1 million question that we're all very confused about. And so I'm here to clarify it all for you today. When you're making that decision, what you need to look at is the interest rate on your debt, right? So what I mean by that is, let's say your mortgage is 3%, right? And you look at your investment portfolio. If your investment is giving you 6 or 7% and your mortgage is 3%, then it makes more sense to invest the money, right? But if your credit card, let's say, is the debt that you have and it's at 19%, and your investment is giving you 6%, then it makes more sense to use that money to pay off the debt. So every time that you have, you're making that comparison between the debt and the savings, you're looking at essentially the interest rate on the debt versus the investment return that you're getting. Anytime your interest rate is higher than the investment return, then it makes more sense to use the money to pay off the debt, right? So hopefully that was clear. Switching gears a little bit in terms of investing, right? I think a lot of people, they ask, and they always wonder, what do I invest in? Should I invest in Facebook? What's the best thing to do? Well, for the average investor, it's hard to know, right? I want you to follow this chart with me. I know it looks busy, but just kind of bear with me. Let's take a look at the red box. In 1997, the first red box, you see there, large stocks, 33%. What that means is in 1997, large stocks provided an investment return of 33%. And then let's just follow the red boxes. In 1998, it was 29, right? So looking good. 1999, 21, 2000, -9, -12, -22, 29, and you just follow this. So what you find is that no matter which box you look at, it's going on this sort of this up and down roller coaster kind of a wave, right? So if I look at the most right column, where it summarizes what are the best years for your investment returns and what are the worst years. Look at the red, the large stocks. Best year was a return 38%, worst year minus 37. On our average, though, it was 10%. So this is the case really for every single investment out there. For the average investor, it's very difficult for us to know what's the next best thing to buy and when do you sell. We don't know that, but we do know that on average, it's growing at 10% to 13%, right? So what I would suggest you do if you're starting out investing is that to put your money in the different boxes. So let's say you have $10,000. You don't put all 10,000 in large stocks. You put 2,000 in large stocks, 3,000 in mid-cap stocks. So you diversify, right? So that's the concept of diversification. Never ever under diversify. So what I mean by that is, if you probably heard of the tech bubble. There's all kinds of bubbles that goes on, right? There were days when gold was extremely high. Have you ever seen those commercials? Oliver Gold, he's always, he goes on TV and asks us to sell our gold to him. If he's asking for our gold, then we know gold is very expensive, right? Their real estate, I think I read that the average house price in Canada has officially reached $1 million for a detached home. So could these be bubbles? They may very well be. I don't know. But what I do know is that I want to diversify my money across the different industries, right? Some in tech, some in oil and gas. If you had put all your money in oil and gas a couple of years ago, look at where it is today, right? So these are all bubbles, and you don't want to ever under diversify. So I always talk about, okay, you can't under diversify, you've got to put your money across different industries, but you also want to take advantage of when the markets are, when stock prices of investments are low, you want to buy a lot of it, and when it's high, you want to sell, right? So market timing. So how do we take advantage of that without really timing the market? Well, there's a concept called the dollar cost averaging method. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you have $1,000. Instead of investing $1,000 in January, let's say of 2015, what you should do is $100 a month for 10 months. The reason being, every time you look at a stock price, it goes up and down over the months, right? So if you're putting $100 each month, the times when the stock price is expensive, you're buying less of it. And when it's cheaper, you're buying more of it, right? So you're essentially participating in market timing indirectly. But whereas if you put $1,000 when the stock price was $14, you would have bought it at the most expensive price, right? So this is what I call the dollar cost averaging, really powerful concept. So instead of investing a lump sum amount in the beginning of the year or any given point in the year, divide that amount by 12 months, right? I'm going to talk about asset allocation. Asset allocation is a very important concept. And what it is how much investments fall into different categories, right? There's risky investments like equities, then there's more safer investments like fixed income, right? So the question is, how much equities should I have in my investment portfolio, and how much fixed income should I have, right? How much risk should I take? Well, a good rule of thumb to use is 100 minus age. What I mean by that is, let's say you're 30 years old today. Use 100 minus 30, so 70% of your investment assets should be in somewhat of equity and fixed equity and risky investments, right? They're not necessarily risky, but they're higher risk. And 30% of your investments should be in safer investments that are giving you dividends and interest income. So the interesting thing is, the younger you are, the more risky your investment portfolio should be. And the older you are, so let's say I'm 60 years old, 100 minus 60 is 40. So 40% of investments are in somewhat of a risky investment portfolio. So the older I'm getting, the safer my investments are going to be, right? So when you're starting out, you've got to let your portfolio grow. And that's why if you're not sure how much money you should put in the risky portfolios, then use this formula, 100 minus age. Easy to remember, right? There are two enemies of wealth. One is inflation, and the other one is taxes. And just kind of give you a context of why is inflation so bad? Okay, so inflation in Canada is about 2 to 3% on average. Let's say my grocery bill today is $100. So in 20 years, by 2035, that same bag of groceries is going to cost me $164, right? So if I look at it in reverse, if I have $164 today, in 2035, that $164 is going to be only worth $100, right? So these are small numbers, but it could mean big things when we're projecting into the future. Let's say today I'm 35 years old. I require about $50,000 in living expenses, right? So after my taxes, and after all those, I need $50,000 to live a good lifestyle. So I want to maintain that kind of a lifestyle in retirement. So 30 years from today, when I retire, when I'm 65 years old, I don't just need $50,000. I need $121,000 to remain the same standard of living as $50,000. And the reason being, it's because of inflation, because it's eroding my money, right? So this is very powerful stuff. So when you're sitting down with your financial planner, you don't say, oh, I need $50,000 in retirement. No, you need $121,000, right? So that's sort of on the concept of inflation. So how do we, I don't have a slide in terms of how do you beat inflation, but just a quick note, making sure your investments are giving you at least 2 to 3%, right? So if your investments are giving you 1%, some savings account is 1% or 0.5%, and inflation is at 2%, well, your money is worth less next year than it was this year, right? So you got to make sure that you're investing properly. Another way to beat inflation is when you're saving on a monthly basis. So let's say you're investing $100 a month into some kind of investment vehicle. Every year, adjust the $100 by 2%. So you're keeping up your savings with inflation, right? So those are two great strategies that you can use to beat the inflation problem. We're going to switch gears a little bit in terms of how to protect your assets. We kind of touch base on how to grow your assets, but how do you protect it? Right? If I ask you the question, what is your biggest asset? A lot of you are probably thinking, well, it's my house, it's my investment portfolio, maybe it's that gold necklace your grandmother left you, maybe it's your car, right? But I would argue it's something much simpler. It's actually your ability to earn an income. And I know that sounds strange, but here's what I mean. Take a look at your lifetime earnings, right? So look at this chart. If you were 25 years old today and you make, let's say, $70,000, over the course of your lifetime, you would make about $4.7 million, right? If you didn't spend a single dollar of what you made, you would have brought in $4.7 million. So if you are, you earn a lot of money, if you make $150,000 at age 35, that's $6.6 million. That's a lot of money. You need to be protecting that, right? So what is your biggest financial risk, right? And this is kind of a morbid subject, but really it's living too long, dying too soon, and inability to work due to a disability or illness, right? These are all things that we don't want to think about, but given 1 in 3 Canadians at some point in their lives suffer a disability, meaning they cannot go to work, that's scary numbers. So do you have the proper insurance? Are your investment portfolio properly protected, right? So I'm going to help you kind of understand a bit about insurance, and you may wonder, what does that have to do with building wealth? Well, insurance is what you use to protect your assets, right? So a lot of people are confused about insurance. What do I need? Do I need a life insurance? Do I need disability insurance? I hope this sort of clarify things. Life insurance, you don't really need when you're young and you don't have anyone dependent on you, right? So if you don't have young kids, you don't have parents who are dependent on you, you don't need life insurance, right? It's somewhat of a waste. What you do need if you are working is disability insurance. That is number one, right? Most of the time it is offered through work, and how it works is it provides you 66% of your income in the event that you cannot work, right? This is very important. So making sure that you have that disability insurance at work, and if you don't, that you have an individual one, right? I'm not going to talk about critical illness insurance and long-term care insurance just yet in this webinar. Today, I wanted to talk about how to protect your earnings, right? And that's disability insurance. Now, disability insurance, there's something in there that I want to kind of bring to your attention. There's a thing called own occupation. So there's a definition of disability insurance. Usually in a work insurance, there's a 2-year own occupation. So what they mean by that is, let's say I'm a lawyer, right, for argument's sake. If I am disabled and I cannot work as a lawyer, they will continue to pay me for the first 2 years. But let's say in the 4th year, I can work at McDonald's. I've somewhat recovered, but I can't really practice as a lawyer, but I can work at McDonald's. They're going to stop paying me, right? But that's not the type of insurance that I want. I don't want to work at McDonald's and not have my payments properly given to me. So this is where individual insurance comes into place, right? Is having an own occupation definition for 65, until you're 65 years old. So that means if, let's say, in the 15th year, I am not able to work as a lawyer, I'm working at McDonald's, but I'm still getting my 66% of my lawyer income because of my disability insurance, right? So very, very important stuff. This is how you protect yourself. When you're planning for your finances, there's two things that I want you to kind of keep in mind. It's what I call your defense and your offense, right? Your defense are things that can take you backwards in life. So that's debt, having loads of debt, not having emergency funds. So what happens if you fall ill? What happens if something happens? You don't have money for it, so you take on more debt. Loss of income, you cannot work, and inflation taxes. These are things that are making you go backwards. So what I suggest is when you're looking at your finances, take care of the defense first, making sure that you have emergency savings 3 to 6 months, making sure that your debt is in control, that you are putting the right amount towards the debt, making sure that you have the proper disability insurance in place, and saving in such a way that your inflation, you're keeping up with inflation, right? After you take care of those things, then look at your offense, which is your goals: buying a home, growing your investments, saving for a vacation, retirement. You cannot have your offense until you take care of the defense, right? So this is a really good way to kind of prioritize your finances. So in summary, curb your spending, right? Create a budget and follow it. Put about 10 to 20% of your income towards some kind of investment, making sure that your investments are keeping up with inflation. So that means on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, you are increasing your savings by the rate of inflation, about 2 to 3%, and making sure your investments are giving you at least 2 to 3% as well. Cutting down your tax bill, right? We're going to talk more about that in the next webinar. How do you reduce your taxes? Because here in Canada, the highest tax bracket is 50%, 50, right? That means for every dollar I earn, 50 cents of it went to the government. That's a lot of taxes, right? So we want to find strategies on saving taxes. I talked about taking care of your defense and before taking care of your offense, right? So that's it for today. It's not a terribly long webinar, but I wanted to keep it sort of short and sweet and to the point. I am open to questions if you have any. And thank you all for joining me today. I'm looking forward to the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey, for a really insightful webinar you have given us. Please ask some questions if you have any. I guess I can start off by touching on something that you did mention. I think a lot of our viewers are, in fact, young professionals, and they have that student debt, and they have that little bit of money they can actually save. So you kind of touched on, okay, look at the interest rates and look at look at the interest rates and look at how much your return can be. So how do you do that when you're investing in multiple markets, I guess, or multiple funds that have a variable interest rate,
right,
like a mutual fund with like an equity fund or something? So how do you just have your best guess and then just go with that, or is there a more structured, more smart way of going about that? What if you don't know the interest rate of your investment? Is my real question.
Right. Okay. Really good question, Matt. So when you're investing in whether it's mutual funds or stocks, on a quarterly basis, you would get an investment statement, right, from the financial institution. On the investment statement itself, it should say the investment return. And if it doesn't say the investment return, you should be able to see what are the gains and the losses for that period, right? So what you can do is at the end of the year, they're going to give you one final statement. It's a summary statement. It'll say what were your gains for the entire year. So if it doesn't give you a very straightforward answer saying it's 5%, if it just gives you a dollar amount, then you can use the dollar amount and divide it by what your initial investment was, and that'll be your investment return. Right? So some of the investments are not as straightforward. They don't just give you, 5% or 6%. So what you do is you gather the investment statements from the different financial institutions that you have them with, and you would do that calculation. And so you can get a sense of what your average investment return would be. Does that answer your question?
Okay. So yeah. So it's kind of so it's kind of dynamic. You're kind of looking at your investment statements like every quarter, for example, and then you're just assessing it based on that.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe you can comment again on the whole inflation. I think you did touch on it. Maybe I lost something. So you said if I have $100 and inflation is $2, the next year I should put $102 into my investments or into my savings.
Right. Yeah. So whether it's investments or savings, it doesn't really matter. So if you got a investment account set up, it actually makes more sense to do it towards the investment account. So yeah, so that's right. So if you're doing $100 this year, next year do 102 into the investment account. Because
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because what happens is that $102 is then invested, right? So the investment return is now on $102 instead of 100. So you're compounding your investment returns.
You're compounding just based on whatever normal inflation is.
Yeah.
So we have one question here. It'll probably be the last one. So I guess I'll rephrase it. It has to do with doing better than the market, or doing. Can you comment? I guess this individual has heard that term. You always want to do better than the market. So I guess whatever the TSS is doing, or whatever the entire stock market is doing. Could you maybe comment on that?
In terms of how, or
yeah, like how do you do better than the market? Yeah.
That might be a question for Warren Buffett, but you know what?
Fair enough.
It's so I guess what the question is, the market is basically the index, right? So whether that's TSX or NASDAQ or whatever it is following that market. How do you do better? Well, technically, if you know what you're doing, if you do the research, technically you're looking for funds that you think will do better. But as a starter investor, a lot of portfolio managers, that's what they're doing. That's their sole job, right? They are actively managing people's money, and their job is to invest your money such that it does better than the market. In terms of how do you do it, well, they have their strategies, and look at charts. They look at how the companies are doing. So if you do want to do better than the market, you've got to put in a lot of research, right? You're looking at specific companies. You're trying to buy them when it's cheap, and that's what they mean by doing better than the market, right? So you cannot just look at something and think, oh, maybe it'll be better than the market. You got to do a lot of research into the specific companies that you're investing. Right.
Perfect. So it actually does take some kind of expertise, and then that's why we hire a lot of financial planners. Yeah. Well, thank you, Stacey, for a good, insightful webinar. We're looking forward to the next one. Thank you all for participating. Our next Young Professionals webinar is next week, June 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern, where we have a talk on the Humans of IEEE Every Story Matters initiative. It's actually a great initiative. I'm looking forward to that webinar. And Stacey's webinar will be following that in the next couple of weeks as well. Please check out our career-based services, the Mentor Center and Resume Lab. They are really there for young professionals. And of course, if you do have any suggestions for webinar ideas or just products and services for our Young Professionals program, please shoot us an email or check us out online. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone again, and Stacey for giving an excellent webinar. Until next time.